What if writer's block is nothing more than a self-imposed creative illusion that is waiting to be shattered? Writer's block is something that all songwriters will face at some point or another, but it has been silencing your creativity for far too long. Hey songwriters, my name's Celine, and I've been writing songs now for 30 years, which makes me sound a little bit old, but I'm okay with that. Writer's block used to stop me dead in my tracks. I had loads of ideas, but I didn't know what to do and how to start a song with them. Couldn't get past the minute details that I was fixating on, and it was crippling my creativity. But over the years, I've learned and realised that there are some things that are happening in this kind of writer's block process, and I've been able to beat it and get past it, and I hope, listening to my experiences, that you can too. Writer's block manifests itself in so many different ways for different people, but I believe I've learnt where it actually comes from, which means that we can beat it. So strap in. This might get a little bit controversial, but if I do, please let me know in the comments if there's anything you agree with or disagree with. I would love to know more about this from your perspective. Firstly, something I think we all need to hear, and that is writer's block is not an immovable object. You can get past it, you can move beyond it, you can even banish it if you want to, but most importantly, we can work through it. It is a personal journey and it's different for everybody, but if I can do it, I know that you can too. Now, if you read on the internet, and if you're watching this video, you might be the type of people who would read the internet, experts or gurus on there might tell you to cure writer's block by going for a walk, or some meditation, maybe even exercise. Now I do agree, this does allow you to forget about your writer's block for a short time. It's clear in your head, and it may actually allow you to go back to what you were trying to work on and make some progress. But has anything really changed? I think it's unlikely. I honestly believe that wishing your writer's block away by walking the dog is not going to help you in the long term. It might help you once, twice, a few times even, but actually working through the problem and the core of where this writer's block comes from is actually what I think is the key to banishing it forever. So what do we have to do to rid it from our creativity for good? So the first lesson that I learnt was that I had great taste in music. And that's not a boast or a brag. I'm sure you guys have got great taste in music too. It might even be the reason why you want to become a songwriter in the first place. But with that great taste in music came great responsibility. I realised something major with my songwriting process at this point, and that was I was comparing my early songs with somebody else's best work. So I was crippled by my own inferiority complex. Nothing I wrote was good enough. And I wanted to become a songwriter because I'd kind of realised the connection that music and emotions and how it can evoke all these things. And yet I was now comparing something that I was very new at to something that somebody had spent 30 years working on. Now, I'd always loved music from a very early age. I have my parents' record collection to thank for that. We're talking the Beatles, Bruce Springsteen, Pink Floyd, James Taylor. But in my teens, when I started writing my own songs, I'd started to discover artists and bands that were instrumental in my own musical evolution, shall we say. These are bands like U2, Counting Crows, Hootie and the Blowfish, and then for me personally, some female singer-songwriters such as Sheryl Crow, Melissa Etheridge, Mary Chapin Carpenter, Gretchen Peters. I was starting to move away slightly from my parents' musical influences into my own and developing my own personal taste in music. But every time I tried to write a song inspired by these amazing songwriters, it wasn't good enough because I was comparing my earliest attempts at writing songs to some of these kind of groundbreaking albums that I was listening to at the time. Now, it took me a very long time to realise that this was even a thing, and even longer to realise that to grow as a songwriter, you had to write songs. You can't let this kind of thing stop you from creating. It's actually where the title for this YouTube channel came from, Write More Songs. There is no such thing as too many songs. I'm 30 years into my songwriting journey. I'm not sure where you guys are in yours, but I'm still not at the level of some of my songwriting heroes, but it's okay. I'm getting better, and now I only compare myself to my previous works so I can see my own personal development. And now I let their amazing songwriting be my inspiration and not my stopping point. In a similar vein, the next thing that I realised that made a big difference in how I see writer's block was that I was experiencing this writer's block because I had given myself expectations for me and for my music. But what was stalling me was that my expectations did not match my current ability or progress. I was putting pressure on myself, which at the time I thought was a good thing because it was going to push my development. But that expectation to write an Ivor Novello Award-winning song every time I sat down to write was stopping me actually writing those songs. Every time I sat down to write a song, I told myself it had to be amazing. It had to be better than the song I wrote previously. But that doesn't have to be the case. I needed to lower my expectations to just above my ability and progress so that I am still striving to be better, but I'm not striving for something that's unobtainable. The book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, taught me that small, incremental, 1% improvements every day is far more fruitful than shooting for the moon. So as a result, I learned to lower my expectations, and I can't even tell you how liberating that was for me. I started writing songs just to practice techniques. I wrote the simplest song I think I could have done. I wrote songs just to write something. I didn't have to make them the best song that I'd ever written. And I actually didn't care if they weren't any good. I was still going through the motions and I was showing up on a daily basis. And what I learned, which was actually the revelation, I changed my goals to small, scalable, daily 1% targets. And it meant that I wasn't wasting huge amount of time working towards something unachievable. Actually made me overachieve. One of the biggest things that happened because of this new change in how I was seeing my own improvements and goals was that I created momentum. So even when I was writing songs that were technically throwaway songs, I was moving and I was constantly writing. So when I sat down to write a proper song, they were flowing straight out of me without any pressure, without a need to force them even. And while we're talking about Atomic Habits by James Clear, one of the other main key takeaway points I took away from that book was, at this time in my life when I read the book, I kept referring to myself as an aspiring songwriter or a beginner songwriter or a want-to-be songwriter. But actually there is a lot of power in calling yourself or identifying as the thing that you want to be or the thing that you want to be better at. And it's at that point that I started referring to myself as a songwriter. I am a songwriter. And by doing that, it changed something in me and it helped me with my own development and progress. And once again, helped me combat the inability to write when I wanted to write. I would ask myself questions such as, what would a songwriter do? Would a songwriter stop writing because they didn't feel inspired today? It was a game changer for me. So I think at this point is when I discovered the pop-up online community known as February Album Writing Month. It's a songwriting challenge where the idea is to work towards writing 14 brand new songs in 28 days, the shortest month of the year. I joined the online community on recommendation from a friend, and I kind of didn't believe that writing 14 songs in February was going to be a thing that I could do. So I just tasked myself with, I'd write a few songs and I'd kind of see what all this was about. The ethos of February Album Writing Month, or FORM for short, is to create freely and then share your rough and raw work. Now, sharing a work tape previously to this would have filled me with such anxiety that I would have frozen. It would have frozen me. But this community was so inspiring and it allowed me to believe that sharing something that wasn't polished and finished in its rough and ready form and gaining some peer feedback was actually really, really important to my songwriting progression. What I discovered was that learning to embrace imperfection in my creativity is a fundamental songwriting principle that I now think is quite simply the single most important thing I've learned. So during that February, I wrote songs knowing that I didn't have to spend the time right now refining them and polishing them. I could spend that time later. They could be rough and have lines I'm not happy with, and that was perfectly okay. I was being creative. There was momentum, and I found myself writing songs in less than an hour, writing songs to prompts and challenges that were thrown out by other members of the community. 16 brand new songs existed on the 28th of February that year, something that I would probably have taken the whole year to do before I kind of involved in this community. And it clearly was a massive turning point for me, but it wasn't the end of my writer's block. Just so you know, so far this February I'm on 15 songs and I've still got a week to go. So from there, it had really got the ball rolling on a more regular basis for me. I was writing much more freely. I was separating the creative process from my inner critic, which was allowing me to be more prolific with my songwriting. I was still getting frustrated from time to time, and although I was writing a fair amount of songs, I still wasn't happy with all of them. But then another nugget of realisation occurred. I went to a writing retreat weekend with two professional songwriters who were hosting it. One of the things during their opening presentation they shared with us was some of the statistics from their own songwriting careers, and it triggered something in my brain that meant that I spent most of that weekend asking them way too many questions about how many songs a songwriter should be writing. So they had told us all about how many songs they write, how many have been cut by artists, and how many kind of top 10 or hit songs they'd had in their careers together. The biggest stat that astounded me the most, though, was the number of songs they had written versus the number of songs that they'd had cut with artists, what they were referring to as their successful songs. The biggest thing I learned from that was just how many songs a professional songwriter would write compared to how many they saw as being successful. What happened after that, I went down a little rabbit hole of statistics, as I tend to do, and I basically came up with what I believe to be wildly inaccurate but highly probable ratio of songs and how to kind of rank them, I guess, that I've since applied to my own songwriting. So off the back of this, I now personally expect myself to write approximately 50 to 60% mediocre songs in the middle. I also expect myself to write about 30 to 40% terrible songs, and that's okay because I'm now expecting them. I can actually embrace them. What's left over from that is that I'm also now expecting that I write 10% pure gold. These are the cream of the crop of my own songwriting, and that 10% is actually quite an ambitious number to achieve. I class mediocre songs as the songs that I'm happy with, I'm not ecstatic about, but I will work on them later, and I categorise them quite early on in the creative process. Before I've had too much time to actually spend refining them, it's like my initial gut reaction to how I feel about the song. So what I do in this process is I kind of arrange them in a traffic light system. So red songs are terrible songs. They're the ones that I'm not going to spend any time working on, and are ones that I probably used to practice a new technique and didn't really want to work on afterwards. I put them in my virtual bottom drawer, and I can pick them apart later on and maybe use bits of them, a melody here, chord progression there, a lyric line here, to kind of use in new songs. They're put away and they're saved to be ripped apart and recycled if needs be. The amber songs are the ones that I am going to work on. These are the mediocre songs, and sometimes when I've worked on them a little bit more, refined them, I've had some peer feedback in a song refinery session, they may turn into great songs. They may go in the bottom drawer and get picked apart for later. And then there are the green ones, the ones that I think are my best work, the top 10%. And this is where it got interesting for me, because they could only be green if they were in the top 10% of my songs. So if I've written 100 songs and I want to have 11 green songs, that wasn't going to work. That's 11%. I would have to bump a green song down to put a new green song in there, or I would have to write more songs so that 11 songs could be the 10% of what the number of songs is. And what I inadvertently did was basically made myself write more songs. I made it perfectly acceptable for myself to not love every song that I wrote, which I had found was a massive, massive problem for my writer's block. I was still expecting myself to like all the songs that I wrote. And talking with the professional songwriters on this writers retreat weekend, they had the similar approach, and they said to me, you don't have to love every song you write. In fact, you don't even have to like them, even if they're hits. Some of the hit songs that these guys had written, they didn't even like, but they were hit songs. And it basically changed something in me again that allowed me to be more creatively free and step aside a little bit further from that writer's block. Now, can you spot the common thing in all of these elements of how I have beaten writer's block over the years? In all the steps of my songwriting journey, where writer's block had stopped me, I was the problem. Me. There wasn't anything stopping me other than myself. I was my writer's block. My expectations, my personal limitations, my massive goals that I was setting for myself, and my inability to allow myself to write songs that I didn't love. These were all the things that were compounding into my own writer's block. And at every step, the answer to writer's block was for me to let go of a miscomprehension or to change my approach to allow me to get beyond it. This is where I think it gets a little bit controversial, because I don't really hear or see other people talking about writer's block in this way. But I do believe that when you do a little bit of internal soul searching and a little bit of self-realization, I believe that you guys are going to be able to get past your own writer's blocks. This is a very, very important topic for songwriters, and I realise that. We can't cover it all in one video, so I'm pretty sure we'll circle back to this at some point in the future. But I am really, really keen to hear from you guys about what you think to what I've said, whether you think I've missed things, whether you agree or disagree with anything I've said. I'd love to have that conversation with you down in the comments if you could spare a few minutes. So my aim with this channel is to help you write more songs. And one of the biggest things is to get you beyond your writer's block so that you can write more songs. If you found anything in this video useful, I would really appreciate if you would like to drop a like and maybe even subscribe for future conversations like this. And then if you think you're ready to start a new song, you might want to check this video out. It's all about 5 ways in which you can start a new song.